thanks to you. It's always really nice to get a message from Steve Hogan to say there's a new book out, and he does a fantastic job of publishing. And I think I like what you said, David. I think it's a lot about us trying to understand why you wrote the book. I'm hoping that lots of people would buy the book.
Me too. Me too.
Yes. So we'd love to. It's always been very helpful when the authors can explain, what the book's all about and why you wrote it. So thank you very much, David. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Howard. And I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me on. Happy to talk about AI and learn from you. So I do want this to be interactive. As much as you have a question, feel free to jump in. I do have the chat open. If you see me looking around, it's because my screens are too big for the camera. But this book really came out of a couple places. So I teach. I've been at BYU for 17 years and always been teaching new technology topics. And AI happened to come out, what was it, November 2023? Or was it 22? I can't remember. November, about a week or two after, someone in the hallway say, "Have you heard about this chat thing?" And I'm like, "Chat thing? What are you talking about?" And they're Chat GPT. Our students are starting to play with it. And I went back to my office, put in a couple things, and I got hooked. And so I have changed my research, my teaching, all of it to start looking at this tool, which is absolutely powerful. So I'm going to start with just a few thoughts. First, if you haven't seen the headlines, there's a lot of them out there on how AI is changing things. So this was the CEO of Shopify, just a little baby $100 billion company. And he released this memo that leaked, and it said, part of the memo said, before asking for more headcount and resources, teams must demonstrate why they cannot get what they want done using AI. And so AI usage is now, he quote, a fundamental expectation. So you think about how different that is. It's not, somebody moved on and I need to replace them. It's now, how can I not get this done with a human? Why do I need a human to do this? All right. If we look again, Fiverr, something very similar at about the same time released it and said, it does not matter if you're a programmer, designer, product manager, data scientist, lawyer, customer support rep, salesperson, or a finance person, AI is coming for you. If that's not, kind of encouraging, he then went on to say this, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not talking about your job at Fiverr. I'm talking about your ability to stay in your profession in the industry. I don't know what would scare him, because it's not just every single position's coming for your job at this company. It's your entire career, is what he was saying. We continue on, and you look at Wells Fargo. They just released that they had now had their AI assistant cross 245 million interactions. There was not a single human handoff and no live data exposed. So I can now go into Wells Fargo app and just plain language type what I want it to do, or even say it, and boom, it does it. Transfer the money here, pay this bill, do that. Exceptional amount of work that's being done. Or you look at Amazon. They released this in their Q1 financial report. They have what's called Q. That's their Chat GPT internally. And they had a whole bunch of programs they had to migrate from older versions to new ones, 30,000 of them. And they had their AI automatically update all of the coding. And almost all of them did not need human interaction. And they estimate they saved $260 million. And this is the crazy number. 4,500 years of human time to do that. I don't know anywhere in the history of the world that we've talked about efficiency gains that can be that high. 4,500 years of time. And we'll just finally talk, this one just came out. A meta-analysis is where you take a whole bunch of research papers and then you analyze all of the papers together. And so some authors came out and looked at what is ChatGPT's effect on learning and education. And so overall, they looked at 51 different studies. And across those 51, they found almost very strong results. So the red lines show a very small effect, a medium effect, and a large effect. And you can see overall learning performance, very large effects. What's interesting is the students thought they learned, but they actually learned about twice as much as they thought. So they're not even aware of how well AI is helping them learn. And it didn't matter what type of learning you were looking at. If you were looking at 4 to 8 weeks usage, if you were using it as a tutor, it was absolutely enhancing learning across these 51 different studies that this meta-analysis looked at. So all of that's just to sum up, and I'm sure this audience understands this. This is a big deal. I do have a question already. Someone raised their hand, so go ahead. Is it Retha?
Yes, it's Rita. Yes, hi Rita. You're on mute. No,
Maybe it
seem
was
to
just
drop off.
waving. Maybe it was waving at me, not raising his hand. So, hi,
I
Rita. I'll
hope
wave
so.
at you. If somebody else has it, feel free to put it in. I can't see the chat when something pops up, so feel free to just pop it in there too.
I will
Oh, and
check
Howard's
it
looking
out
at
as
it.
well.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Howard. So we talk about all of this. Now, how do we harness this potential? And how do you start seeing benefits? And really, the purpose of this book is there's two different ideas. One is you need skills. You need to know what to do, but then also this idea of a change of mindset. I'll say on the skills side, there are lots of things. I started a company, Skill About. You should all go buy that. But there are tons of resources out there, LinkedIn Learning, all that, to learn how to do prompting. There's not as many people talking about mindset. So that's what I want to dig into and talk about today. So if you think about skills, you're thinking about what is generative AI? How do you work with it? What prompting skills are important? How do you build? So if I just pull this screen over, most of us, I think, are familiar with ChatGPT. When I talk about skills, it's do you know what each of these different models does? Do you know what a reasoning model is? Do you know what deep research? Can you create images and use Canvas? Um, are you aware of the basics for this? For example, here's Claude, and I can say, make an interactive widget to explain what is Gen AI and how it works. I want to talk about the temperature parameter in particular. Okay, now that's not a particularly good prompt because I'm just typing it in real time. But now they've got these things so sophisticated. This is vibe coding. It's actually going to program everything in a language I do not know. And you'll watch and it's going to go through and think. And this is really satisfying for me is how fast can any programmer ever type this fast and build something? So we can start thinking about skills as, do you know what few shot prompting is? Do you know what end shot prompting is? Recursive prompting, all of those types of skills, you have to know that to start using the tool. Now, most of them are pretty basic. You see, I can type whatever I want and I get an answer. So this is the sort of thing when I say skills is what I'm talking about. We're going to have this pop up because it's going to be important. I hope it creates it the same. I'm a high risk presenter because I like to do things in real time. So here it is with a simple 2-sentence prompt. I now have an introduction to what Gen AI is. Here's how it works. And then here's the temperature parameter. Now I want to stop on this temperature parameter for a second because this is key to understanding what mindsets we have to have. We all know computers, almost all of our computer interactions are deterministic, meaning if I click on the camera button on my phone, it opens up the camera app every single time, no matter what. They're like calculators. If I type something in, I know what's going to happen. Gen AI is different, and this is critical for everything we're going to talk about with mindsets. What Gen AI does is there's this ability to interject a little bit of creativity. It's determined by this temperature parameter, and it's going to make the sentence, the next word prediction, a little bit more variable. So as we think through that, it has very significant implications for the rest of how we use Gen AI, which is what we're going to get to when we go back to talking about mindsets. I'll show you one other one. If you haven't started playing around with multi-agent, there are a lot of low-code, no-code tools like LaneFlow, N8N, where you can actually design these tools, connect them together, and give them abilities to do web search and calculators and programs and interact with your databases and all of these things. This is the next big step we're seeing in AI, is moving to agentic AI. All right? So those are skills. Now, as we talk about mindsets, we get into this different of not how do you do it, but how should you even think about it? Why is it important? Where can you apply it? How do you lead others in a world of Gen AI? And for the rest of the time, I'm going to talk of just about some different examples of what this looks like. So let's first start with what is a mindset. So what's a mindset? It's the established set of attitudes, beliefs, and assumptions that an individual holds about themselves, others, in the world. And you guessed it, I got that different definition from ChatGPT. Okay, Howard, I've got a question before we continue.
Yes, David. um, I, I have a few cousins that lecture at universities, and their response has been really negative about Gen AI in terms of the students making use of it and really just believing everything that it says. And then I also had some feedback from someone called Cal Newport that writes on deep work. And he did some research in terms of how students are engaging with Gen AI in a very conversational, and not to get input, but just to be able to talk to someone about what their thesis is, or whatever it is. So I'm certainly picking up very much in the university point of view, where they see it as a very negative thing for students and what they're doing with it. I'm not sure how you relate to that as well.
Let me jump ahead to address that directly heads on.
Yeah.
What does learning look like in the age of AI? and I think this is one of the big mindset shifts we have to have. So mindsets being our attitudes and how we think about things. Imagine this: at my job, I stand up and I teach. And the history of professors are that professors knew everything. You know, we went to college and got a PhD. And back in the very old days, professors were the only ones who had books. And so literally my job was to read the book, and you would copy it down because you didn't have a book, and then you would memorize it and learn. Well, we've advanced a little bit since then. And we still, though, teach very similarly. I stand up and pretend I'm the smartest person in the room. I say a whole bunch of things, and then I make you pass an exam of all the stuff I've taught. Well, ChatGPT changes that entirely. And when I say ChatGPT on this call, realize I mean just Gen AI, generically. But any student who has a phone can click it on, and they know more on every single topic that I talk about than I do every single day. So you can start to see, Howard, why some faculty get very, very nervous about this tool. I've presented to companies, governments, educators. By and large, almost universally, educators are the most negative about generative AI.
Okay.
And absolutely, that there is a very big group that just says ban it. And I will talk a little bit about why I think learning is very critical, in that you can use AI in one of two ways: the easy path and the challenging path. The easy path is I copy the question down, I put it into ChatGPT, and then I copy and paste the answer in for the solution. I didn't do any work. I didn't learn anything. I didn't become anything. All I did was serve as a very fancy copy and paste tool. Now, that absolutely should concern us and worry us, because there's no deeper engagement. Now, on the other side, there is the ability to now interact and learn at a rate that has never been possible before. And I'll give you a couple examples. So first, if you do the easy path, you're absolutely going to destroy learning, and you're going to turn into a mindless zombie. And furthermore, I tell my students, if that's all you're doing, you're going to be the first people that I replace as a business owner, because all you can do is what I tell you to do. So I now tell my students in my class that we start by teaching them Gen AI for the first few weeks. I say, in my class, you better use AI for every single thing possible unless I tell you not to. And if I tell you not to, you better ask why not. And I better have a good explanation. The impetus is on me as a faculty to say, why can't you use this incredibly powerful tool? So if we think about that, learning, a lot of people say, well, learning's not important. Education's not as important in an AI world. And I actually think it's the exact opposite. Learning is phenomenally important because of how fast things are changing. And just to demonstrate that, let me go to two videos. So this is what AI looked like in 2003 and then 2004. Now, don't get nightmares from this screen, but I'm going to just watch a video for just a minute. I love this video. You know, you have this beautiful, and sorry if it's a little grainy on across teams. You got these Play-Doh faced Will Smith shoving something into his face looking like spaghetti, versus this perfect puppy that, you know, is absolutely flawless. Well, if we go to 2005, that was the best state of the art in 2003, 2004. This was January of this year. I mean, I'll just stop it there. You look at everything, how fast that has evolved. In under 2 years, you've got the physics correct, you've got the lighting correct, you have, the faces correct, all of that. Learning is absolutely speeding up. So I think learning is a buy in this economy because people are going to have to stay up to speed on what's going on, just the skills necessary to produce this. Now, let's talk a little bit about how does this change learning and how we need to think about the mindset change. And this gets into what is an expert and the whole idea there. So I had a colleague who did a really fascinating experiment with her students. She said, in class, you can come to class and either read the textbook chapter or here's 20 terms, and you have to know these 20 terms before you come to class. And so some of the students read the textbook and, typical read the textbook, fall asleep, and it's kind of boring. They came sort of prepared. The students who had the 20 questions, they came understanding this exceptionally well because they did something like this. They came in and said, hey, I need to learn about digital twins. Explain it to me. And you'll see it very quickly explained it to them, but they could then interact directly with the answers and ask and say, hey, I don't understand that. Explain it as a third grader. Give me another example. Could you explain it in accounting context? Can you explain it in a marketing context? And so they came to class having a much deeper and richer understanding in a less amount of time than it took to read the textbook. And so not only did they know things better, but they knew them faster. And so you start thinking about faculty and how we have to change our mindset. Our whole paradigm has been disrupted now that we have a tool that's smarter than we are on everything. Does that address that a little bit, Howard?
Yes, it does. And I think I just responded to Melissa. She asked a question. We need to evolve our way of education and qualifications as Gen AI is here to stay. So, Melissa, am I correct? I believe your question's also been answered by that.
Yeah, pretty much. But I just don't think it's kind of putting the university cap on. They're just having this negative view around Gen AI, where actually they need to be looking internally and adjusting basically the education and the qualifications because it's not going to be going away. So that was just the point that I wanted to confirm on.
Right.
Absolutely agree on that one.
Yeah. And David, I don't know if you read the article by Cal Newport in terms of the way in which students are making use of it to improve their papers, what they're publishing. So they're really using it as a way of conversing rather than give me the content. It's really nice to be able to sit with Gen AI and say, have I missed anything? Am I making sense? And that's a nice way of doing it before submitting your paper.
Well, and I'll say, I think it was Melissa, if I have that name right. What she said is absolutely right. It's going and changing how we think about teaching other people. And so, yes, there are some students who use it to just what I'll call cheat. They put it in, they don't do any thinking. But like you said, there's far more that are using it to enhance and extend what they're doing. And that's the key now we have to take as teachers is how do we teach them to choose to do that harder path that's going to make something better.
And we got another question from Michael. Yes, Michael?
Yeah, it's just a quick observation. So I think that when you think about the purpose of education, I think that there's obviously the preparation for the real world. So you want to go out there and, quote unquote, get a job, so you're job ready. But the other is a certain set of skills that you expect the learner to have developed over the course of the educational time. And in some cases, I mean, if you allow students to use AI, you prepare them for the workplace. If a workplace says you guys must know how to use AI, you have some experience. But on the other hand, my view is quite simply that because AI becomes prevalent, you're going to have a lot of people specializing in certain domain areas, domain knowledge, because some of the technical stuff AI can deal with. And Gen AI can give you really deeper insight because when you use keywords, you're really talking about the key semantically weighted, what do you call these things, ideas or whatever it is, and then an AI can AI can give you the links and give you the depth that you need. I think the real issue is simply how do you separate the skills, the mechanical skills you need versus the organizational skills. How can I take these AI agents and get them to work together to achieve a deep domain problem that I know a lot about, partly because I learned from it, via AI. It's an interesting way of
Yeah.
thinking about it, but some of those skills which you learn from the AI usage are also quite important, as well as the knowledge that AI is giving you.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I was talking about my book, I'm not focusing as much on the skill set side of things. Not that that's less important, but what I found is skills are easier to teach and train people on than it is to change their thinking around, should I be using this at all, and how do I use it, and their mindset of, oh wow, I've got AI now. Even in students, I'll ask a question and they're like, I don't know the answer, and I'm like, well, why don't you know the answer? Open up your laptop and get the answer. And they're like, well, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even consider that, oh, wait, it's no longer just me. It's me and my computer working together, me and my AI working together. William, I see you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, so my experience has been, now let me tell you where I'm coming from, right? A while back, I wrote a book, and I'm now converting this book to a movie. And so I went on, had a couple of chats to ChatGPT, and I discovered that it really doesn't have an ethical set of boundaries.
Yep.
And so, whereas if you have a textbook, it's kind of been through the review, and there's a confidence that that there is this ethical line that you can use for that textbook. How do we? I don't know the answer. But how do we get that ethical line for ChatGPT not to take us into areas that we, or that the university feels, that's actually not a space you should be in?
This is a fascinating question, and there's not an easy answer. So I actually wasn't planning to talk about this, but I'll jump directly into this. Let me put an ethical frame on this by talking about bias. So bias, and I spend a chapter talking about bias in the book, and you have to think about bias in two different ways. First, there is statistical bias. Now, statistical bias, just as a layman's term, is any deviation from an absolute or a truth. So if I want to know the true score of my students in class, it's an 83%. If I take a sample, I'm going to be somewhere different than 83%, and I have a bias. There's no value-laden application applied to that term of statistical bias. It's just a fact. You deviate from a norm. Now, often we use the word bias, and this gets to your ethical question of it deviates from something I want it to be. So you start thinking about hiring decisions. I don't want to be biased in a hiring decision. I want to hire, a qualified candidate and not favor, say, men in front of women or women in front of men. And if I don't have the right outcome, I'm, in a layman's term, biased. So the models, as you very, very accurately described, are programmed on all of human knowledge, essentially. Huge amounts of data, and they have a lot of bad stuff in there. Comes to find out, a lot of people have written really, really bad things. And so when you start trying to create a model on data that has a lot of bad stuff in it, say racist things or xenophobia or ageism or all of those things that we don't want, the model is going to show those bad things. So you have a couple choices. One is you can say, well, let's stop creating this model. And we're done with AI. Another option is to say, well, let's try to train the model to behave how we want it to behave. Or three, you just let the model exist in the real world and train users how to use it. Each one of these comes with costs. We're going to set, don't use AI at all. We'll throw that one out the window. We're going to use AI. So let's say that's not possible. But here now comes the challenge. Do you want to let users make sure and decide the output, whether it's ethical or not, or do you want the company who designs the model or the organization to do that? And this gets very, very tricky. At first, you're like, well, let's just not have it do bad things. And Google tried that. They wanted a model that was, very representative of the world, and that's great. But then when you went in and said, give me a picture of the founding fathers, it produced, here is a person of a black man, an Asian, and a woman. And it's like, those were not the white founding fathers of the United States. They were all white men. And so you start to get these hallucinations that don't represent reality. Furthermore, the further challenge of trying to make a model be ethical is whose ethical lens do you want to apply? And that gets very, very complex if you have a different cultural norm than I have than somebody else. Just take a hiring decision. What should hiring look like? Should it be a 50-50 split between men and women? Or should it have each ethnic group represented proportionally? Well, and let's take the proportional ethnic group. That works great. But if you're going to do a model of the United States, the ethnic grouping is very different than a world model, than the South Africa, than the Libya. And so designing those ethical decisions are going to be very difficult if you put it into the model. Not that it's impossible, but to me, the easier place to start is first training the user, and then we have those complicated questions of what should the model be designed to do and report on average. We could probably get into a very long discussion, but I think you raise an incredibly important issue that a lot of us need to be talking about, and then educating people on that issue.
Yeah, that is amazing, because if you really think about it, when I walk into your classroom, I have a confidence of what I'm likely to expect and where I'm likely to wind up. When I go on ChatGPT, I don't get that.
Yes.
And worse still, my parents who are paying for that may also have an issue with the fact that I'm not actually getting what they think I'm getting.
Yes. So what are the guardrails we put around education or learning or just usage of ChatGPT? And I like how you said your parents, it starts from very young to the classroom to professionals. And I wish we all are searching for easy answers. Oh, just do this or do that. You know, do this or that. There are not easy answers in this. And there are trade-offs and hard things to think about. And let me just go to this. Oops, sorry. Go back to this simple question. Everybody put in the chat, answer this question. You're sitting in a meeting and someone said, I use ChatGPT to make this report. Am I cheating or not? So I want to see some answers pop in the chat. Is using AI in your company cheating? No, no. I got 2 people that are listening. No, context dependent. Michael, you should become an accountant. That's always the answer. It depends when I teach my students. No, provided validated the results. Now, what's fascinating is the people who self-selected onto this call are almost all saying no. When I ask this in another webinar of just general people, or when I present in front of others, almost all of them say, well, yeah, it sort of is cheating. It's too easy. It's too fast. I can produce a report. I didn't have to think. I didn't have to work hard enough. And they get really, really concerned that somehow using this tool is cheating because it's so easy to produce results. Melissa, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, because that's a really good topic, and I actually did a little post on that a couple of days ago, and it was exactly those words, like, are you cheating? Because I come from a project management background. Are you cheating if you are summarizing your team's chats from all the progress updates? Are you cheating? And a lot of the comments that came back was, no, you're basically using your time efficiently, which is what Gen AI will do for you. So it's actually taking away the admin burden that these project managers have and making them have more available time to actually manage the project, manage the issues, manage the stakeholders, all of that kind of thing. So the feedback I received was that it's not cheating.
And I think if you talk to people one-on-one, most of them will say exactly what you say, Melissa, is it's not cheating, it just took out this boring stuff. But if you're in a staff meeting, most people, and you raise your hand and say, oh, I use ChatGPT to produce this report, people kind of roll their eyes still at you. And this is the mindset change we need to start having. And maybe it's happening faster than I realize, but most organizations I'm working with are still, it's kind of a shadow AI usage. Can we hide that we use it and just not tell everybody that we're using it? And we haven't brought it out to the open to discuss. I can see, is it Alberto?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to type in the chat, but there is some policy here. I cannot send messages. So my observation would be that business reporting data using ChatGPT, yeah, the question would be, how did you feed the ChatGPT for producing this business report? Where did you take the data from? So it depends. Cheating is not the main problem there.
Well, and I want to bring this up. First off, if a company has rules, then yes, not following those rules is cheating. So if your company says don't use ChatGPT, you can't just use it on your phone and say, hey, I got around it. That absolutely is cheating. What I'm talking about is actually, is it using it to enhance the work I'm doing cheating? And it still kind of feels like it. When you can write something so fast, when you can proof things, read things so quick. And somebody just said RAG support, it can help with analytics of your data. Absolutely. There's RAG models, all of this. Helping people realize using these tools to be more efficient and effective is not cheating, is this mindset shift. It was funny. I was hired by a large organization to come out and present to them. And there's a couple hundred people in the room, and we're teaching them how to use AI, how to use ChatGPT. And I ask a question, and one woman raises her hand, and I said, well, what's the answer? She's like, well, I don't know. And I was like, well, how could you figure it out? And she's like, well, I can't. I said, well, what about using ChatGPT? And she goes, oh, no, I'll never do that. That's cheating. And half the room was nodding their head, just like, our jobs are to think and be smart, not use other tools to make it faster. So I just bring that up as one for you to think about. This idea, there is cheating, because we already talked about learning. If you cheat the process of becoming, absolutely Gen AI is a problem. If you're using it just to do work minimization, that's going to be a problem. However, if you can change this to say, how can I do things better and more, then it's absolutely going to be a positive. I'm going to move on to another mindset. Unless I see no questions. Perfectionism. All right. So perfectionism is something that bothers a lot of us. Wanting to be good, wanting to be perfect is not the problem. Perfectionism crosses that line when we're so focused on that we're not perfect that that's a problem. I want to produce this perfect report, and until it gets that, I just keep iterating, and the stress and all of that building up. That is the problem. Now, contrast that with a growth mindset, where you see that there's potential and progress. Now, we're going to talk about this in the terms of Gen AI. A lot of people expect Gen AI to be perfect. I wish I had $1 for every time somebody raises their hand and says, well, I tried ChatGPT and it got this answer wrong. And they said, you know what, it's not very good. Now, the first thing I asked them when that happens is I said, okay, were you using the paid model or the free model? And they're like, well, I was using the free model. Okay, so first, you're not using the best, latest technology. And then I said, well, what does your prompt look like? And usually it was just some sloppy prompt. I copied something and I said, okay, so first you're condemning this technology because you're not using the best one and you're not using it right. And often they double down and they'll say, well, it makes mistakes. And therefore we can't trust it, we can't use it. All right, I'll stop there. Michael has a comment.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You mentioned about using it to make you more effective.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw a talk where someone was saying actually some of the best uses of AI start from not only asking AI how you should interact with it. So you're asking the model itself, how do you best want me to interact? But also asking it to ask you questions about yourself so that it zones in on the most important context to make sure that your responses are really relevant. And I think the other thing I wanted to just note is just a bit of cheeky comment, really cheeky, that when we think about AI, by definition, AI, the Gen AI is really a hallucination machine. That's what it does, but we condition it to hallucinate on sensible stuff. And sometimes it sort of carries on the hallucination beyond the sensible stuff. So when we put these guardrails, we're like saying, hey, I know this is what you are, but please stay within this area and sort of don't sort of, hallucinate beyond these bounds. It's just a cheeky comment.
Well, that's actually very kind of a cool idea, is the whole, and this gets the whole idea at the beginning I said was it's probabilistic. It's meant to design and come up with unique and different answers.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
your thinking is very good on that. How do you take somebody who has every possible idea in the world and then focus them down to just talk about the stuff you want to do? I think we've all sat and chatted with a person who will never stop talking, and they just keep going on, and occasionally try to steer the conversation a little bit to what you care about or what's relevant. That's an interesting metaphor for thinking about how AI works, and you're just steering hallucinations in the direction you want them to be. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, if we go back to this perfection idea, too often there's a dismissal of Gen AI because it's not perfect, and this one's fascinating. I'm getting started on some research in this area. If people that dismiss ChatGPT and they say, well, it's not perfect, you ask, well, when you have your subordinate do it, are they perfect? And there's always laughter saying, no, You know, when I have the intern do it, when I have the staff, they make mistakes too. And yet, for whatever reason, we give humanity to humans and give them mercy and say, hey, it's okay if you're only 85 or 90% accurate. We can deal with that. But as soon as the Gen AI is producing at 85 or 90, no, it's terrible. It's bad. We expect 100%. And I think that the best place you can see this is driverless cars. So I actually went my first driverless car just a couple months ago, and it was a weird, surreal experience. If you haven't had it, highly recommend it. You get in and you're sitting behind a steering wheel, and it just does everything automatically for you, and it does it really, really well. And as I was sitting there driving, I thought, you know, who am I more scared of? I'm currently teaching one of my daughters to drive, and sitting next to her driving versus sitting next to the autonomous, you know, car. I actually feel more nervous when my daughter is driving than when the computer was driving. So it's fascinating, and yet when we go to work, we hold these computers. They have to be perfect before we'll use them versus just good enough. Howard.
Yeah, that's a lovely example, David. I was in the Phoenix conference with Steve, and we had Waymo, and initially my wife didn't want to get in the car, didn't want to go there. And when we got in the car and we saw the impact of radar in terms of what that car was able to recognize, it's almost impossible for us as humans to operate at that level. It knew all the trucks. It knew everything about what was in a 360-degree view of your car, and it was phenomenal. It was mind-blowing as to what it could understand and recognize about the traffic around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you've been in it a couple times, you're like, wow, this is really good. And then you look at the cold hard facts, and accident rates, I think, are half, damage is far less. And the best thing we could do for saving human lives is require everyone to drive driverless cars. But we're not there yet. But I think analogously, you start to look at, and it's taken a while for AI to get that, for cars to get that far. We are just on the same place with Gen AI. We're at the very earliest editions of Gen AI for cars, you know, the equivalent of what we're going through in our organizations using that. And Debbie, I was much more scared. Yeah, same feeling. If you drive with somebody who's new, it is a scary, scary feeling to drive with them the first time. So helping people realize, even though AI is not perfect, it hallucinates, it makes mistakes, and not hiding that fact is important to start getting them on board to start using it. And then we've got to start figuring, how do we hold AI to the same level of accountability that we hold humans? And I'll say I created a couple before AI, autonomous way of grading. If you use different technology tools and it spits out an answer so that we could grade these because there's just too many students to manually grade it. And so to actually validate the tools, we had humans grade it, and we found about a 5 to 7% error rate on all of the humans grading, whereas we could get computers down to 0% or very close to 0%. And so getting people to shift that mindset is going to be important. All right, I'll move there. Let's go. Oops. Those silly videos. I'm going to just hide those real quick so they don't keep popping up. I want to come down to this. We're going to jump to this question. I want a couple people put in chat. What makes an expert? So we talked a little bit about learning, but let's talk about the other side of learning. Once you become an expert, if you're going to put in, describe what makes a person an expert, how would you describe it? Okay, I've got the first couple. I'll give a couple people just a minute to put that in. Uh, 10,000. Oops, I put my mouse on the wrong screen. Trying to mouse over. Okay, so we got a couple answers in here. Let me read a few of these. Can teach others about your field. 10,000 hours. That's the 10,000 hour per expert. Time in the saddle, experience and application of knowledge in various circumstances. Persons with knowledge and experience can do and teach. Knowledge, depth, experience, intuition, handling of exceptions and never seen before use cases. Confidently teach a topic. Deep understanding. Can explain something. Okay, Good. So, and then an expert should also know where knowledge and experience ends and anticipate. So some wonderful thoughts about this. And I'd love you to picture somebody who's an expert. Often when I picture experts in my profession, typically they have a little bit of gray hair as it's said in here. They've got some experience, wisdom. They've been around the block a few times. They've started doing all of this. Now, here is the crazy thing is what is expertise? What is an expert going to look like in an AI world? All right, and I'm going to give you some ideas. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a few of my research projects in relation to this. Okay, so anybody know who Gary Kasparov was or is? Gary Kasparov. All right, Melissa, who's Gary Kasparov?
That master chess player.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was, some say, the greatest chess champion ever. He does hold the notable distinction as the last great human chess champion. So he's the one that a couple decades ago played Deep Blue in a chess competition and he lost. The computer finally beat the human, and it was, I think, late 90s about the time. And everybody started saying, hey, it's the end of humanity. Computers are better. We're still here, but they thought it was over. What was fascinating is not his story of how he got beat, but what happened after he got beat. He finished and he said, I want to open up a competition to see who is the best chess winner. And he said, anything goes. You can use computers, you can use teams, you can do humans, you can do anything you want. And it spawned a whole new type of chess that people play and compete in that anything goes, who can win the game. And it was fascinating as he started holding these tournaments. What he found is that it was this combination of human and computer together would win. And even an amateur chess player with a really good computer could beat most grandmasters. Now, this idea of expertise is important to realize what's going to happen in the AI world. An amateur with AI is going to beat current world experts. And I'll give you an example. We did a research paper. So I teach in accounting and auditing. A big part of every audit is you have to assess risk. So you go in and say, hey, where could there be potential problems? And let's see, are there problems there? And auditors are required to do risk assessments. So we did an experiment where we had interns do the task with and without ChatGPT, and then professionals, 13-year veterans, experts in the field, do it with and without. What was fascinating is we found out that an intern with AI outperforms the current experts that don't have AI. And now that flips everything on the head. I can take my students with AI and they will likely outperform most people on this call because of pairing that human with AI. So as we start thinking of expertise, it's going to change from an individual to a team. Now that team is also going to start looking different. We had somebody stand up and presented a presentation and said, your students will start on day one at our organization leading a team of PhDs. And you think about that, which student in the world is ready to lead a team? But he was talking about the AIs with agents. And so how ready do we have to start training employees to think about how do I lead a team of near perfect workers on all of these tasks? And then the interaction, not just with that, but the other humans. You think there's office politics now. Wait until we have humans and AIs competing for job promotions and recognition and all of those things. It's a whole new set of challenges. Okay, I see somebody just raised their hand. Is it VJ?
VJ is.
Yeah,
Hi,
hi.
VJ.
Yeah, I have a comment as well as a question for you. So I use ChatGPT mostly for getting some coding related work, and I also back it up always with a web post like Stack Overflow to see if the answer could be sensible, just to do the sense check, right? And most of the times it is right, and sometimes I think the expertise also comes in when you get to a point where you can judge if the answer could be dicey. You go back and see if there is a better answer, and then kind of validate that and try it out, and then maybe rate it. But the question that I have is, you guys have probably seen that Sam Altman has admitted that sometimes even being polite or asking some unnecessary questions could cost ChatGPT probably a few thousands of dollars. So the question is, in this workshop, or in the mindset of using AI, what would you reckon would be a stupid question, or let's say what would be a sensible one? Do we completely rely on it, or what is there a line where we need to draw to see how much should we really depend on AI?
Perfect. 7. The answer is 7. You know, how do you? This is Ethan Mollick. If you don't follow Ethan Mollick, he's I think one of the best minds on this topic. He coined this idea of a jagged technological frontier. That there's some tasks that AI can do phenomenally well and others it struggles at. And the reason it's a jagged frontier is because it's not clear ex ante which tasks these are. And it changes as you use different models. So this is the hard part about AI, is it would be nice if you could just plug it in and say, okay, now you never have to add numbers again because it does those perfectly. Okay, now you never have to code in this language because it does those perfectly, but it doesn't. And so you have to have this combination of trusting and questioning the AI all at the same time. And so as we start thinking about expertise, that is the new expertise, VJ, is how do I know when to trust it and how do I not? That only comes from using it, experimenting with it, and then learning from others. And so it's not that I can do a workshop and say, here are the 5 rules of when to use it, here are the 5 rules you can't. It is much more like working with another human being. And if I work with my colleague, I have a good idea of where their strengths and weaknesses are, but even in their strengths, they still will sometimes make mistakes. And even in their weaknesses, sometimes they will get things right. That's the best analogy we have for working with AI. And that is the frustration and the beauty of working with AI. It's both of those things caught together. I think Michael has his hand raised on that. Maybe he has a better answer than me.
No. I think your answer is a great one. But I was just thinking about this whole team concept.
Yes.
So I know that back in the day, when I was in school, we were taught that the financial markets were also information mechanisms, and you could infer predictions or expectations from these prices. And then prediction markets, apparently a lot of the times when you look at things like election predictions and things like that, often you find that prediction markets tend to do very well. And there is some underlying phenomenon that sort of creates that effect. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because everyone has like different areas of expertise or whatever. I know in the AI world, they've got a lot of good results by having a mixture of experts and things like that. So that ties in with this team concept. But I was just thinking that to some extent, once we start having swarms of AI agents and we start relying on their output to make predictions, maybe the phenomenon behind that might be slightly different, because everyone knows that AI models often are recursively trained on the same data, they generate the same synthetic data, and so you have this sort of model collapse type situation. And my question is, at some point, if we believe we have more human experts in a team, we do get better quality information. But will that be the same thing if we all start having a proliferation of AI agents? That's my real question. You know, there's a different phenomenon at play here.
So Michael, I think you need to come start doing PhD research projects. I think that is, I think that's a wonderful research question. How much human, how much computer interaction do you have? Which one should be dominant in controlling the interaction? Which one should not? What does that look like? And then how fast is that going to change as we get new models? So we do have to worry about model collapse. We have to worry about those sorts of things. We are seeing early indications that there are ways you can use synthetic data to get away from that. I don't have enough information, data, I haven't read enough studies to give a final answer on that. But I will say that we are seeing possibilities, but I think your question is exactly right. And I actually kind of feel bad sometimes talking on this because, you know, people say, well, you do an AI, you should have the answers. And most of the people who do AI who know what's going on don't have the answers. They just know the questions like you raised. How are we going to start working with this? I don't know. And this is why I'm no longer an expert. It's because I don't know. The world has changed, and that's when we're going to have to figure out by experimenting, and then think of the challenge of that is how fast is that going to change as these models keep getting better and we consider new ways of working with them. So I'm going to write that one down as a research project to start because I think it's an important one, but I don't have the answer for that.
Thanks.
Yep. William.
So the human beings are emotional creatures, right?
Yep.
They also have to live physically in the world. They've got to eat, they've got families, they've got all these different things going on, which AI doesn't have, right?
Yep.
Now, when you get into a situation whereby your job is under threat because you happen to rely on an AI thing giving you an answer, then my question is, how many times do people turn around and say, but the AI said so? Because that's what happened when I think back to the first days when we started to move away from, I'm giving my age away now, when we started to, and it's worse in South Africa than in all the other countries, just about, right? But when we started moving away from bank books, where you would actually make written entries, and the computer became a thing, the immediate answer from the teller was, oh, the computer made an error. The computer made an error. And it was an immediate blame shift from me making a mistake to the computer making it. Even if I did, that's fine. How are we going to get that emotional thing right? Are we going to dumb down people's emotions to make this an equal playing field? Or are we going to tell people, look, this is a tool and you're still accountable for everything you choose to believe? And you better find other ways to confirm that what you're seeing is in fact real before you decide to make a decision on it.
Yes. So I think the latter is going to have to be the approach of, you're the human owner of this, you have final say, until a process is entirely automated, and then the programmers will go in and fix it. But as long as it's this co-creation, the human has to know they take ultimate responsibility. Now, here is where we need to start thinking about you said the emotions, humility, and empathy. You can see a couple of those things up on my slides right now. We have to be able to let people say, I don't know. I just answered Michael and I said, I don't know the answer. Now, most organizations, people don't like if you say, I don't know, or I'm not sure, or this answer, I think it's my best answer. So as we start holding people accountable, if you don't give them an out, they're going to operate just like the AI, which says, I know the answer every single time and here it is. And they're just going to hope they're lucky and don't get caught. So this is the challenge is you can't just hold them purely accountable if you don't give them an out to say, hey, I've worked on this project for an hour or two. I still don't know the answer. This is my best guess, even with working with an AI. So I absolutely believe in accountability, but accountability with some ability to say, hey, I don't know, or I'm not sure, or here's what I think is the best estimate. You can see that students are like a little microcosm for the world. They're kind of fun. We get them all the time. We turn them through all these tests and exams. If I force them, they have to get an exam correct, they're going to have really stressed out. They're not going to be happy. They're not going to learn as well, but they will give me an answer, and it may or may not be right. However, if I give students a project and I say, hey, I need you to get as far along as you can, and then show me how far you got, but I don't demand, you get to some perfect outcome, the students are less stressed, they perform better, they go farther without having that other piece of it of the accountability that strictly says, we're going to fire you if you don't get this right. Does that help a little bit?
It does. I mean, I suppose context matters, right? So, for example, the last piece of work I was on was designing a nuclear power plant in the UK, right?
Yeah.
So you can't make a mistake on something like that. And therefore we had to say, sorry, ChatGPT is not something you can use. We need you to use your actual expertise. And that's what we had to do. There were some things that people wanted to start using it on, but the risks were just too high. So, so I suppose context does matter.
Well, and you have to remember, thank you for not using ChatGPT on a nuclear reactor. I'm not that confident in the technology. I would say there's two things. One is we are still at the very first days of this. It's just still brand new. And so we're going to look back in 5, 10, 20 years and laugh at kind of the questions we were saying now because of how far it's advanced since then. But currently, right now, in this interchange of exchange, you're exactly right. Now, I would question the second piece, though. Could we use ChatGPT when building a nuclear power plant, such as stress testing or coming back after the fact or reconsidering things? And so maybe you don't use it for the initial test, but it sure works as a great, second guesser. I heard of an awesome example of that in boardrooms. So a number of boardrooms have said, we're going to have a ChatGPT observer in all of our board of directors meetings. And not that it's going to give us ideas, but once we reach a decision, before we say it's final, we're going to say, hey, I want the ChatGPT to play devil's advocate. And I want it to question everything I've done and ask the questions, the hard questions, the ones that maybe weren't politically appropriate to ask. And then it hammers them with those questions. And so hopefully on the other side. So it's using the tool correctly. And I think you're right. You don't use it to produce the nuclear power plant, but maybe on the other back end to test it and stress test some thinking and stuff might be helpful. All right, Howard, I have a hand up from you, and then we'll go to, I can't see, is it Kira?
Yes, Kira and Melissa. David, one of the things I learned early on in introducing AI to organizations is, first of all, to understand the state of the information that we have.
Mhm.
And Kneffin did a great job in segmenting our understanding. Is it known? Is it simple? So we could almost use an if then else statement, or is it more complex or complicated? And it's interesting is once you position the question or decision into those 5 different areas, you take a different technique. And in some cases, like COVID or things like that, where you just don't have the data, you actually shouldn't use data to make the decisions. And that's where we have to say, well, is the use of Gen AI appropriate for this situation? And then applied correctly. It all depends on the state of your information and the technique. So in some cases, when you know what it is, you just want to confirmatory analytics or exploratory analytics. And sometimes we don't spend enough information or understanding of what information do we have and what's the state of our information.
Excellent observation. Now, I will say I would just add one condition on that. How you use the tool can change. So if you don't have a lot of information, you use it for brainstorming and idea generation rather than confirmation, as you said. So I completely agree. Very well said. Thank you for bringing that up. Kiro, hope I said that right.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I was gonna just put it in the chat, but I can't use the chat. So I've had a few situations where I was apprehensive, like most people. So I did a parallel use of AI in general. I think it was
Yep.
ChatGPT at the time. And using it in parallel. And then I got to what I thought was a better answer, a better solution,
Mm-hmm.
only to put it into practice and then realize, actually, if I assess this, I should have went with the human solution
Mm-hmm.
in the first place. And would you have any advice on the assessment of the result, and assessing whether what you think is better is not necessarily better in the first place?
So as I think about that, this is why we see differential adoption in different business segments. So for example, marketing, you see a lot higher adoption of AI because I think they can do exactly what you did, is A/B testing. You can use AI versus human, and you can rapidly test, and you don't bring the world to an end if your ad doesn't work for 1 week. And the nuclear power plant is the other extreme that was already brought up here. I am not aware of anyone that has developed a methodology to predict whether humans or AI are going to win on the outset. Before you actually run the study, before you actually conduct it. That's the golden goose. And it's the inherent nature, I think, of all prediction. As my finance teacher said when I was a student, the only thing we know for certain with a prediction is that we're going to be wrong. It's just, can we start being less wrong? Can we narrow how wrong we're going to be with that? So I don't think there's some, AI is not going to be a magic elixir that we can just say, okay, AI said it, so it's therefore going to be right. The future is hard to predict. That's why they're predictions. That's why we try to do all of this. So there isn't an easy way. Now you can start thinking of learning models, and if it's, how much random variance is there in predictions, and you can get better and better and better. But fundamentally, predicting the future is hard to do. And I hope it stays that way. If it doesn't, we're going to be in some of these weird movies where we all just, march around and there's no free will and choice. So I don't have an answer to how do you predict the future well. If I did, I would be beating the markets really well and talking about, awesome vacation places rather than how to work. Okay.
So David, what you're saying is 100% right. Intuition is something that I think is really being spoken about here.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is auto-suggestion.
Yep.
If I have an auto-suggested statement, I can default to it because it's been suggested.
Mm-hmm.
If I have no auto-suggested statement, my intuition is clearer. And so I would say in that particular case, what you need to do is you need to really test your intuition first, because intuition is connected to things AI can't get to, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a soul level and there's other things that take place on this planet besides the data space, right? And so, so I would listen to the intuition first. And if you don't get a good, clear answer there, then, and you can then use that intuition to ask a whole bunch of questions and try and narrow stuff down. But I would not discard the intuition. That said, intuition is not always right either. So, you know.
Yeah, it's sort of you're darned if you do and if you don't. Intuition is great. It's kind of like that the saying, you know, common sense is wonderful, but it's not that common. Usually intuition in the studies that have been done doesn't win on average over time. And so yes, it can win, and occasionally you're going to have to rely on it. I'm not dismissing it, but there's a lot of people with bad intuition. And when do you trust intuition or not? There isn't a formula for that. Howard.
Yeah, David, the question, and certainly my understanding is Gen AI is just an approach. It's not everything. So integrating that with a knowledge graph or an ontology, and I think the important thing is that we should still be building an ontology to be able to understand this information that we've got back from Gen AI. Is it something we understand? Is it false, or is it something we don't know? And so we need to be bringing lots of things together to confirm our direction and the way we're going. So, and going back to Kira's point about when do I know? Well, you have to start bringing domain ontologies and that in to help you understand whether you're going in the right direction.
Excellent said. And I mean, Gen AI came out and everybody's like, ChatGPT is going to solve all the world's problems. And it's not. It's going to help. And you're seeing increasingly it being integrated with other tools and giving it other abilities, like you suggest, that do more. Now, at the end of the day, none of us will come up with a perfect solution. There's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. And that's going to happen. And how we deal with that is this idea of a mindset of how do we get in the mindset to prepare people that it's not always success with AI, and there's going to be failures as well. Michael?
You know, David, if you look at what Howard's just said, the knowledge graph thing is great, but if you don't give the knowledge graph definitions of the terms to Gen AI to actually go and do a deeper understanding of what it's going to feed back to you, you're going to wind up getting something that's also not aligned. So it comes back to definition, right?
Yes, I think you're right. And I think that's someone put in the comment, does it also depend on the quality of the questions being asked? So absolutely. And so it's this nexus of all of these different things together produce an output. And so part of it is just, we have to realize it's that complex and we can't take simplistic answers. Michael, it's good to see you, my friend. We went to school together, so he's going to have the right answers.
Oh, nice.
I have all the right answers. So just so you know, obviously this topic is very hot. My CFO just went to the AICPA CFO conference. I think it was down in Vegas or something. But anyway, there's at least 2 or 3 discussion topics on this. And my question is, since we're talking about kind of like the mindset shift and thinking about it, how do we manage that process? Because he came back gung-ho, like this is going to solve the world's problems. I don't know how you even integrate this. I don't even know from a security standpoint, like say you just wanted to ask a question like, what does my cash flow look like in the next, 10 months or whatever? Where do I even upload that type of data, from a security standpoint, things like that? So obviously I have tons of questions, but more just about managing how it's going to change the world and how to manage that process.
Yep. So those are great questions. I'm going to punt on some of those because that's going to be specific. That's kind of the skills bucket. I'll give you a high level. Yes, you need to be worried about security. Are there ways to solve it? Yes, there are ways to solve it. There are different vendors that provide that. Can you make processes repeatable and implement that? Absolutely. There are answers to all of those questions. This is probably not quite the right form, especially with the time I have remaining to address all of those. So send me an email. I'll be happy to follow up with you on those. From the higher level of how do you manage this is how do we lead in an AI world? I think first is you've got to get started. I'm surprised how many organizations are still standing on the sideline and aren't even experimenting. And we're starting to see that change, but we talked about the professors at the beginning as being a good example of that. As the leaders, you've got to be using this regularly and trying it. Changing the mindsets, Michael, is going to be harder than changing the skill sets. You can stick an IT team on this and they can come up with the solutions pretty quick of how to put this in place that people can use it and those sorts of things. But getting people to use it and use it well is going to take longer, which is much more around stories and not just facts. It's showing the real win scenarios that are happening from this rather than just, repeating blah, blah, blah. That's why I started this whole thing with here's what's actually happening in companies using it. If I were to recommend for your organization, what I would say is pick 3 people and have them say every week they're going to be going out to lunch and sharing what's working, what's not. After a couple months, those 3 people are going to be really good. And if you can extend it to more, as we see this roll out with some of the major Big 4 accounting firms, some of them are having great success in different groups because they're letting people start to experiment and play with it in practice and sandboxes. And then you can start using it in the real world in production once you curate some of those sandbox experience. But that's that last point. You've got to give people the ability to and permission to fail without being punished. Now, you don't put that in practice with your nuclear power plant, at least in the main stuff. So we've got to start creating these sorts of things. Okay, I have a couple more coming in. Appropriate governance and oversight. Yes, change management is always the tricky part. Absolutely. I will show, just to show you that I'm not a cheerleader of this, if you'd like, here's a free framework for some governance. We worked with about, oops, that's the wrong one I pasted in. This is a governance framework that we worked with about 1,000 professionals. It's got a maturity model just to get you started. From Fortune 500 to really small organizations are kind of building this idea of how do you govern Gen AI and think about that. So I'll just put that out there as just a note if you're interested in that. Most people find this really boring, but if you like Gen AI governance, there's some stuff to think about. I know we're a little bit close to time, so I want to be cognizant of that. What other questions do we have to make sure I'm addressing what you want to know? Anything else? Have I missed anything, Howard?
No, you haven't. I think it's good maybe just to have a last round of questions from anybody involved and
then wrap up. Okay.
Maybe, yeah.
All right. Any final questions? I thought I heard somebody, but
just the fresh one. Okay.
Nope. So I think someone just forgot to mute. Okay. Well, then I'll wrap up here kind of at the end. There's my contact information. There's the book information. Gen AI is here. It's real. And I think this call, oh, I do have a question. So, Mela.
Magella. Yes, you're on mute, Magella.
Hi, hello, Howard et al.
Hi.
Hi. I'm unable to write messages on the how to write. Okay, but my question is about the future, okay, of this AI. What is your thought about the future of AI? I know for sure ChatGPT or many other similar tools will disappear or evolve and then rise and others, okay? Or many others, okay? What is your thought? What is, there is no the end, okay? There is no end, okay, for this. But what is the near future or the future? What is your thought? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So what is the future of AI? That's a daunting question to consider. I'll give you just a couple quick thoughts. I love, a couple people have said we are using the dumbest AI that we'll ever use again in our life today. And I think that is very, very true. The energy and focus on putting efforts into AI is mind-boggling. from governmental investments to nation states to individual corporations to just small mom and pops. I have never seen so much entrepreneurial. I'm in accounting. It is not an area of entrepreneurship, and yet we're seeing tons of startups in this space. So I think the next, I don't know, time frame, say 5 to 10 years, are going to be incredibly exciting with what's developed. I have no clue on what's the cap of what AI can do or not. I used to start saying those sorts of things, but now I say it either can do it or not yet. So I don't have a bridge on that. I do think we are going to see increasing adoption. And as I tell my students, if I can tell you how to do something, AI is going to do that. You have to start figuring out the things that I'm not telling you to do to be valuable in the AI world. So that's the initiative, thinking outside the box, trying something different. That's where AI is not good. But if I can just say it, AI will soon be able to do it. Debbie, I think I have a question from you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you may have answered, and I'm sorry if I didn't catch this, but I was wondering of like where to go career-wise. What would you recommend where AI is taking a lot of career opportunities, and which career journey would be good to walk alongside AI so that you wouldn't be in jeopardy? Is that
I
the
get that
answer
question a
to
lot.
that one?
That is a great question. Where do you go? Where do I recommend my kids study? There is no safe space. You know, people are like, can I go into this and I don't have to worry about AI taking my job? I think that's part of what's happening is it's disrupting everything. I was flying home on the plane and a guy says, well, I design high-end entryways to hotels. You know, AI is just overhyped. It's not going to do anything. Well, I pulled out ChatGPT and said, well, give me a description of a hotel entryway. And he said, I want, you know, this type of architecture, this type of wood and that. And I said, like this? And I show him a picture and he's like, holy cow, how'd you do that? And I'm not a designer. I can't do any of that. So it's everything. It's the humanities, it's business, it's engineering and the sciences. It's every single one of these groups is being disrupted at the same time. And that's not even taking into account the things we're starting to make innovations in computing, and I just forgot quantum computing, and starting to accelerate all of that. So I think that's the wrong mindset of, hey, where can I go to hide?
Yeah.
Hiding is the exact wrong way. And there's a great question in here is how do we create an AI culture, an AI first culture? That to me is the key, is not running away from this and trying to see where I can't. It's jumping in and embracing it. The sooner you start learning it, the sooner you're going to be able to add some real value to organizations and to yourself of how to get there. Someone just said it, need to surf the wave. Exactly right. So how do you create that culture? You buy this book and you have everyone read it. No, just kidding.
We're going to do that too.
No, but on a serious note, you do need to start talking about this. Start devoting time to anytime you have meetings as a group saying, hey, we're going to spend 5 minutes sharing. Someone share a use case of success. Somebody share a failure. And appropriate, bringing up both sides so that we're not just blindly adopting AI. But it's getting people to start doing and using it regularly. Buy subscriptions for people to use it. I mean, $20 a month is dirt cheap so that people can start using these tools. And then also highlighting, I think the key part is highlighting where the AI is not, or where we're strategically not going to be using this. And you might have some companies that say, no, marketing is all AI, and others say it's not. And that's just fine. But clearly stating where do we want to start using this and start moving, and where do we avoid it, because we think that's where our secret sauce is. So those would be kind of a few of the ideas. Anyone who says they have this figured out is probably trying to sell you something and they don't know what they're talking about. It is complex and no one has figured this out perfectly. It's going to take time and experimentation. William. Go ahead, Debbie. Sorry. Do your follow-up.
No, it's just when you said it was an expert in the future is going to be an amateur with a computer. That was just very exciting to hear, that you don't need to put in 10,000 hours and that you will be able to become an expert a lot easier. Not easier, but you know what I mean? Like it's, so that was just very interesting that you said that. So we need to make her a friend.
And with students, I find that. So I give a lot of now open-ended projects. I'll say, do this. Now you have to go out and invent, create, or make something. And the stuff they come back with surprises me, because these are accounting students who've never done computer programming or who've never gotten into this domain, and they'll come back with things that are really, really good. And so it's exactly that. An amateur with AI that's willing to try and make mistakes and improve is going to be very, very successful.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yep. William?
So I presume that the board of directors in their annual report is going to have to indicate at where artificial intelligence is being used in their various departments and various other things. The same way as they have to declare the definitions, for example, of their various accounting terminology that they use. I presume in their processes they're going to have to start to define that in their risk space.
So I have not heard of any regulation that requires that. I will say I lecture regularly, well, I have in the past regular at the SEC, and if you think business is slow, regulators are even slower, unless they're Europe and they like to regulate first. And so we're seeing very different regulation regimes. And with the change in administration in the United States, people are not trying to slow it down. But I would imagine, at least internally, they're having these discussions. And I think eventually externally, you'll have a lot more discussion, unless everybody's using it everywhere. And then it's just, yeah, we use AI in everything. And what do you want me to disclose? And I think we're quickly moving to that place.
So can I read from the King 5 draft governance document that's out at the moment?
Okay.
It's under information governance, and principle 9, the governing body governs information and its deployment through technologies to enable the organization to expand its opportunities and set and achieve its strategic objectives. What I found interesting about this as a deviation from King 4 is that it doesn't even include the human side in this principle. And that's almost like, okay, this is where we're heading, right?
Yeah. Thank you. That is very interesting. I can't remember who asked that question. Was it Mela? That would be a fascinating, there's your answer. You have groups that are just kind of looking to the future. Parts of the future are going to not include humans at all.
Yeah.
So I think I am at time. I do want to thank you. And I do hope you'll continue to connect with me and share. I am not the one who knows everything, and I want to learn. And I do really believe it's a community. That's one of the mindset shifts, I think. So I appreciate you taking some time. If you do read the book and have feedback, let me know. And just happy to have been here. So thank you very much.
David, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just have one question, and you don't need to answer it. And typically we give a free book away to someone who asks the most enlightening or thought-provoking question. Is there someone or a question that you really